Chapter 2. Sam Saloon was standing alone in the big gangway door when Stevens returned, once more thoughtful, to Miller's livery barn.
"You liar,"
Sam accused familiarly.
"Telling that girl that manhunting wasn't your meat, and with a straight face, too. You're just afraid it's going to turn out too dull."
Pat met his beady gaze gravely, without immediate reply. "Sam, there's more to that deal than Dell's bothering to chalk up on the board," he said heavily at length. Saloon nodded.
"I reckon I got that all right. A man don't barge off hunting some hombre 1,000 miles away without mighty convincing advanced information as to just why he's doing it. Although in her case, I'll take my chances of making a pretty tolerable guess."
"Oh? What's your slant?" Pat's brows went up.
"Now, it's simple."
Sam was almost smug. In salty, graphic phrases, he sketched a picture of Della Follonsbees, as she probably was, beautiful, willful, and fresh from the soft cradle of luxury, and used to having her own way in just about everything. Not yet had the full force of old Bart's lamentable failures and disgrace struck home to her. Numbed as she was with her personal loss, she is yet too plumb to the whole significance of what had happened.
"Well, this hunter she's pawing dirt about was probably the slick ear she was fixing to marry," proposed Sam. 10-1, Follonsbees' tumble froze that deal. Hunter saw that he'd never be boss of the Pitchstone Ranch, and he pulled his freight." He paused. "You know what pride is in a spiteful girl like Della. She knows, but she can't bring herself to believe it."
"And you think that she aims to make Hunter hand it to her face to face and straight from the shoulder, huh?"
"Well, what else?"
Sam countered promptly. Pat's answer was dry. "Well, if your reading's correct, it doesn't say very much about the girl's judgment."
"Well, that's true," admitted Saloon gruffly. "But it's the way of the world, and you know it."
Pat thought it over without haste. "Well, you might be right. It's my private view that Della's a whole lot deeper than you give her credit for, though. I think she knows what the score is, and her interest in Vern Hunter lies in another direction altogether."
"Yeah?"
Sam was mildly incredulous.
"Maybe you want to say what it is, then."
Pat declined to comment himself. "It's easy to be wrong about things. If the answer is what I think it is, this is a game I'll never take cards in by choice."
"Well, for goodness sakes!"
Saloon did not wholly pretend. He had long known his young friend to be sharper a wit than himself, but concrete evidence of the fact seldom failed to exasperate him afresh.
"I don't aim to be prying into no family skeletons. Maybe you're the hombre that she's been secretly engaged to all these years."
Pat made a playful pass at Sam's hat, brushing the subject aside. "Where'd Ezra sneak off to?" he queried brusquely. "I left him here with you."
"He stepped down below here for a plug of chewing," he said.
Sam's tone grew sober.
"Come to think about it, he has been gone long enough to ride to the Bar yes and back. You don't reckon—"
Pat shrugged as he broke off. He knew what the other was thinking. Lanky Ezra was an inveterate poker hand, seldom known to pass up the chance to sit in at a game. That, not improbable, was the lure what had told him away tonight. By common consent, they set off down the street in search for their comrade. Well knowing the place in which he would most likely be found, they tried them all, but without result until they stepped into the Gold Eagle Saloon. Nor was the sight that met their eyes there at all what they expected to find. Sure enough, Ezra was in the bar, but not now was he fingering the pasty boards with the big thick knuckle fingers which appeared so awkward and could prove so deft. Even as Pat and Saloon pushed in through the batwing doors, he was in the act of backing a pasty-faced cowpuncher into a corner, and every sign of intent of mayhem in his crouch, anger crowding into his face. "Don't tell me what I saw and what I didn't see," he was saying. "I saw you laying hands on the Follonsbees girl, and if I say so, that's the way it was. Now try again and I'll blast you." Caught by these pointed words, Pat stared hard at the cornered man, a stocky, sandy-haired young rip with hawk-like eyes and heavy, hard-looking features. For the life of him, Pat could not be sure of identification, on the strength that what he had seen through the gathering dusk at Miller's livery, but Ezra had been closer than he. The big fellow was not prone to mistakes in such matters.
"Hell, I ain't been out of this bar more'n 10 minutes all afternoon," croaked the accused vehemently. "And that was to go and eat. Now, you got me mixed up with—"
"Hey, you mark me," Ezra bawled, overriding the frenzied protest. "Your time is up in this town, rat. You're wearing out my patience, and I'll mix you up with the most of the street out there. I've already wasted one warning on you, which ain't my habit." The other men in the room were watching it all, wary and withdrawn. When Pat spoke, his tone was wirily humorous. "Maybe if you'd let him out of that corner, he'd ooze on out of here. Right now you're kind of blocking his progress, Ezra." "I'm trying to keep myself from pasting him, and he deserves it." The big red-headed giant did not bother to glance around, his one eye glowering at his captive. Instead of acting on Stephen's proposal, moreover, he edged closer menacingly. Not one could have doubted his ability to beat the other up in a rough-and-tumble fight, despite the disparity in their ages.
"I tell you, you got me all wrong. I don't even know what you're driving at, man. What's all this about anyway?"
"Stand on your rights, Granger," a new voice struck into the talk. "I'll back you up myself if there's any need for it." Pat's head swiveled, his eyes fixed upon Ches Denton, the cattle buyer. The latter leaned against the other end of the bar, gazing at Ezra challengingly. "What do you know about this, Denton?" Pat asked the man. Tersely, he told what he and the partners had witnessed outside the livery barn.
"I don't know anything about it," was Denton's grunting response. "The point is, I don't believe that Chuck Granger knows either. In fact, I'm sure of it."
"You know him?" Ezra rumbled, reluctant to give an inch.
"Well enough to know that he's fresh from Arapaho country over east and possibly couldn't be acquainted with, Miss Follonsbees," retorted Ches coolly.
"Does he have to be making a pass at her?" growled Ezra shrewdly. Denton's smile was hard.
"Not at all, but you and I are not fooled, Ezra, and I don't think that Stevens is either. I believe the girl knows her assailant quite well, and why he was attacking her for that matter. Perhaps she hardly is to be blamed for refusing to admit as much."
Again, Pat felt the thrust of dislike for this man. What Denton said might very well be true, yet that did not excuse him for having said it, and Pat's tone went gravelly. "Wouldn't like to quote chapter and verse for those remarks, would you, Denton?" Ches spread his well-kept hands, his look inscrutable.
"Well, as to that, I was just guessing, of course, but we've both been around for quite a while, Stevens, and we know this country pretty well. What do you think?"
Pat's manner remained cold. "What that girl did for her dad today speaks for her character louder than any words of ours. If I understand you right, Denton, I don't like what you're implying about her a little bit." I'm saying it in a pinch, and I'll act on it.
Oh, don't take me wrong, warned the stock dealer, backing down smoothly. I meant no reflection whatsoever on Miss Follonsbees. Why, I don't even know her myself. A man be very foolish to go out of his way for such a pointless purpose.
Thought you was defending Gregner here, or is that pointless too? Ezra growled harshly. Take any such game at that girl's expense, and you'll learn your mistake.
Oh, nothing of the kind. Denton was boldly calm. I merely wished to point out reasons why Chuck obviously had nothing to do with the matter.
I was there. You wasn't. The big redhead ground out stubbornly.
Well, still, I say you could be mistaken, insisted Chess smoothly. In fact, you must be. I won't stand here and see Granger jump to satisfy a grudge he doesn't even gather the meaning of.
Sure, Chuck put in for himself, emboldened now that he had found support of even the most shadowy kind.
I tried to tell him that myself, Denton, only they wouldn't even listen.
All right. Ezra rubbed his big hands together, as if they were still itching to be at the fella. You didn't do it, but this time I'm telling you, you won't do it again neither. Drink your drink, Granger, and yank your hat tight. They're waiting for you back in Arapahoe County, and if I was you, I wouldn't disappoint 'em longer than it takes you to get back there in an all-fired hurry.
Oh, that'll do it.
Ches Denton was more preposterous of the tone than the occasion seemed to require.
You run your blazer, Ezra, and we're suitably impressed. Just do as you're a mind to, Granger, and I'd suggest you do it in your own time. They have a sheriff in this town, he proceeded levelly, and there's such a thing as an injunction to protect law-abiding citizens from precisely the same kind of underhanded attack they're accusing you of.
Why, you lily-fingered Philadelphia lawyer, I got a notion to take you apart, roared Ezra. Hold on, Ezra, Pat interposed swiftly and firmly. Don't let anyone hand you a stacked deck. Granger's the man we're interested in, if he is the hombre, and I'm beginning to think you might have been right about him at that. His glance crossed Denton's warningly as he spoke. Let's say there's a reasonable doubt about this whole business and let her lay for the present, why don't we? Still, Ezra stood undecidedly, his face a thundercloud. Aware of fiercely contending forces at play here, even though he did not fully understand their meaning, he was not one to allow himself to be shoved around. He glanced at Chuck Granger without unabated enmity and keenly resentful of interference from any quarter. Denton strolled forward quietly and jerked his head at Granger in a commanding gesture, and Chuck sidled towards him, noticeably avoiding Ezra's glaring eye. And from his actions, Chuck might have been a satellite of the cattle buyer, a slave at his beck and call, but whatever his status, he was clearly not of a caliber to withstand the brand of pressure which Ezra exerted upon him by sheer malignant weight of will. Drag your tail, you, Ezra barked as the puncher passed within a couple feet of him and slid her out around the corner at last. Denton coolly interposed his bulk between the two of them with a disdainful look. Ezra started forward fiercely, only to be halted again by Pat. That's enough, Ezra, the latter retorted low and forcefully. They're going. Just let 'em go. Together, Denton and Granger moved towards the door, nor could all their deliberation conceal the fact that this was a retreat. Chest's glance coasted around warily in an effort to place Sam, who had kept himself out of this wrangle, but Saloon had disappeared for the moment, and the stock dealer did not bother to inquire further. Unobtrusively, shouldering his one-eyed friend towards the bar, Stevens talked to Ezra quietly, both so engrossed that they both likewise failed to note the squat little man's absence. But Saloon was gone for no more than 10 minutes, and when he reappeared it was to slip up through the rear door. Ezra had so far calmed down by this point that he had protested gruffly to Pat when Sam came up. "Sorry if I had to make hay or stock deal with Denton," he apologized awkwardly, a tremendous concession for him, and the index of his regard for the younger man. "I reckon you'll never see the color of his money after that hassle." "The hell with his money," Sam snorted, barging into the talk without ceremony. "That crooked hairpin ain't worth worrying about. Just one thing that puzzles me about him, Pat. Why would Denton go to the trouble of deliberately lying for that shady Granger character?" Pat studied his stubby face curiously. "Sure he did, are you?" "Well, ain't no matter of doubt," Sam countered. "I slipped outside and was watching them when they left. They talked a minute, and then Denton headed off down the street, and Granger piled into a horse at the rack and pulled out into another direction. The brand on his bronc was Bart Follonsbees' old box table brand." All knew that Follonsbees' Pitchstone Ranch brand carried north with him years ago from Powder Valley and called the box table, derived from the initials of old Bart's surname, doubled back and placed back to back and enclosed in a square box. Ezra stared his wrathful surprise at Sam's unexpected announcement. "Why, dang them two birds!" he exploded hoarsely. "That means that Granger don't hail from Arapaho country at all." "Well, more than that, I'm afraid." Pat Sober's tone jarred oddly. "You can take it as well that Chuck came here himself straightway from Pitchstone, and it means that Denton happens to be telling the strict truth about one thing at least, that Dellen Follonsby did know who she was tangling with tonight, and as he said, she probably knows why." His face fell into settled lines. Manifestly, he found these inescapable conclusions unwelcome, and Sam glanced at him quickly. "You mean—" he began. Pat shook his head curtly. "Not what you'd think I mean, Sam. To my mind, there isn't a thing in the world against Dell in this at all, unless it's harshness and inexperience. But this is a whole lot different setup from what she wanted us to believe all the same. There's no questions about that, none whatsoever." They gazed at him, mystified. "You doing something about it, then?" inquired Ezra. "Could be I'm not overly bright, but even I can see trouble piling up staring that girl in the face when a smooth gent like Ches Denton interests himself in her affairs." Pat weighed his answer deliberately. "No, I can't see myself getting involved in the dirty business out of stupid curiosity. Not on my own accord, anyhow. If I got it blind in a few little matters in the past, it was never by choice. You can paste that on your hat." His tone cleared in an endeavor to shrug the subject off. "All this, of course, indicates a little talk with Dell Follonsby at the first handy occasion. I'll never let that fine girl walk into grief without a serious warning, but she understands my position well enough, and I've already declined any personal interest in the business, and I'll have to insist that that sticks." End of chapter 2.